Well, my initial reaction is they try to, make it as soft as possible of a landing or an exit, if you will, for Mike. I mean, he's very good friends with Robert Saleh. This wasn't a mutual parting. This was the Jets parting ways with him. Let's be honest there. And you know, it's stated that he has some teams had inquired about him. I'm sure a lot of teams maybe for whatever, I don't whatever offensive role. I can't imagine he's going to jump right in as an OC again right away, but maybe some sort of offensive assistant quarterback coach or whatever. I wrote some stuff earlier in the week, trying, preaching for some continuity. But at the end of the day, when you do look at the numbers, they are damning, and they're damning for 2 years. And, the more I thought about it, if the 49ers are going into a playoff, by the way, they won 10 in a row, including their last five entering the playoffs with the last guy picked in the draft this year. So in Brock Purdy. So, the Jets are not the only team that had injuries in the offensive line and at quarterback and at running back, all of which the Jets had this year. At the end of the day, they were 29th in scoring a year after being 28th in scoring last year. So it's just not good enough. And I'm not really sure. I got the feeling that this was going to be Robert Saleh's decision, and I'm sure it was a very difficult one for him. But at the end of the day, I think he, realized he had to make a move. Yeah, I would not insert Woody that heavily into the equation right now. I asked Joe Douglas specifically on Monday when we had the kind of the post-mortem with the Jets, if any roster changes were going to be Roberts and Roberts only decision, including, him and Woody, you mean Joe and Woody. And Joe made it pretty clear that it's Robert's decision. My read on this, and again, I don't have any information as to whether Woody stepped in. I know he was very ticked off at the end of the year, very disappointed, as of course they all are. That's not breaking news. But my read is I just think Robert had to make a tough decision, and the interesting dynamic here is the talk, let's shift this over to Zach Wilson for a moment. Robert's been resolute in stating that they plan on continuing to develop Zach. Now, listen, Mike LaFleur is probably the most accountable guy in that building. Every Thursday we would speak to him, and every Thursday, if something had gone wrong with whatever, he always said it starts with the coach, starts with me. And his last meeting with us, he basically admitted that he failed Zach and just didn't do a good enough job with him. So, the dynamic now that's interesting is now you're going to bring a brand new offensive coordinator in, and try and presumably, even if the system is somewhat similar, maybe it's not going to be similar at all. Zach's learning a whole new system while trying to be developed in his third year after two failed years. Let's be honest. And I mean, how is it possible this guy's really going to be the Jet starter, in 2023? I mean, I didn't think prior to this move that Zach had a very good chance of being the starter next year. But listen, we're kind of getting into the Sam Darnold dynamic now. Their previous high draft pick at quarterback, quote unquote franchise quarterback, who had a revolving door of coaches and offensive coordinators. So it seems to be a bad cycle the Jets are in right now. But I just think, again, I feel like at the end of the day, Robert just looked at the numbers and looked at what's taken place this year, particularly this year. I mean, last year, you got a rookie quarterback. Zach did not make, even though he had some injury issues, obviously got hurt in training camp, he just didn't make the kind of jump you need to make in your second year. I mean, it was really, you can nitpick and say, oh, he was better at this or that, and then he looked better in practice or whatever. It didn't show in the games. I mean, he had a couple of flashes in the games. We brought him back in the Pittsburgh game. That was probably his one shining moment earlier in the year, and so I think at the end of the day, it's, Robert just realized he's got to shake something up here. So, you lose 6 straight games. You score no touchdowns in the last 3 games, 4 touchdowns in the last 6 games. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, throws 4 touchdowns and a half, and the Jets had 4 in the last 6 games total, not just touchdown passes. So, it just wasn't good enough. And that's a lot of times we hear Robert say that, after losses. And I think he probably made that assessment at the offensive coordinator position. It's a huge year for them. I mean, when you've got the talent that they have, certainly defensively, they were fourth in the league on defense in fewest points allowed and fourth, I believe, in fewest yards allowed. If you rank that high in those spots, you should be in the playoffs. And that's, the bottom line is that's the honest assessment I'm sure that Saleh and Douglas and everybody made. But that said, including some of the offensive talent that was brought in, Joe Douglas obviously seems to have missed pretty badly on the quarterback last year, but he's hit incredibly well. With Brees Hall, the running back who they lost in week 7, and obviously Garrett Wilson, the receiver. So you throw that talent together, and then with the defense the Jets have, and presumably, there'll be some changes, but the core will likely be back. I have little doubt that they're going to bring Quinn Williams back or re-sign him to a long-term deal. They have to make the playoffs next year. Year 3, you got to make the playoffs. That's just the way the NFL is these days. There's no such thing as 5-year plans anymore. So, it is a big year for all of those guys. And quarterback room, it's pretty clear Zach's going to be back. I don't see him as the starter. I think that there's no way that they can't carry on without bringing one of these veterans in some manner, whether it's Garoppolo. Garoppolo seemed to make a lot of sense, with LaFleur here because it was the same system the 49ers are running. The other dynamic here is who's going to come here, right? So Frank Reich, for example, is a terrific offensive mind, but a guy that's who's obviously coming off being a head coach, that is that established. Why is he going to come here and join Robert Saleh's staff when he could be fired after? Say they go 7-10 again next year, miss the playoffs. 6-11, whatever the number is. I don't see Robert and Joe surviving that, and we go back into that Jets cycle again where they're looking for leadership again. So I think they're in a tough spot trying to find somebody. Maybe Robert has somebody in mind who he knows, from 49ers days. He's extremely well traveled, between his, his Seattle experience and Jacksonville and obviously the 49ers. So, Robert knows a lot of people, Saleh does. So maybe he has somebody in mind, but I have a hard time thinking a guy like a Frank Reich, who's pretty established, will come in here and take reins of this offense.